the first story of the Mud Fairies. The very first fairies of all were the Mud Fairies, said Willow, looking up out the window at a sky as blue as her eyes. A small white cloud seemed to look back down at her. The only one in the sky close by was moving very slowly, as if it had nowhere very important to reach. In fact, it was almost as if it had stopped passing and couldn't be bothered going anywhere. It was a lovely day outside, but Willow was sitting at a little table with her pencil in her hand. Arwen, her 4-year-old sister, was resting close by on the couch with a hot forehead and a funny feeling in her tummy. Willow nodded to herself. She had promised to write a story for Arwen, so she wrote this part down. Then she looked out the window again, her face dreamy, as if she was remembering something from a long time ago, and perhaps she had, for although she was now 6 years old, she did not want to forget all the things she had known since she was very tiny. "Where did they live?" asked Arwen. "Didn't they live in Fairyland?" "No," said Willow, "there wasn't yet any Fairyland." She nodded to herself again. Yes, there was something she had nearly forgotten, but not quite. Arwen looked worried. "Why wasn't there any Fairyland? There is Fairyland, isn't there?" Her tummy seemed to hurt a little more. "Of course there is." Willow put her pencil down. "I'll tell you what happened right from the beginning, because it was the Mud Fairies who first came there." "All right," said Arwen, feeling happier. "It happened this way," said Willow. "Once upon a time, there were no fairies in Fairyland. There wasn't even any Fairyland yet." She stopped and thought a little, then added, "There were no little tree fairies flying through the woods at night, holding hands and dancing in the light of the full moon. There were no little baby fairies tucked up inside the petals of the prettiest flowers so that they could keep warm on the coldest nights." "Then where were they?" asked Arwen, sitting up a bit higher, propped up on one elbow, her little face anxious. She couldn't wait to find out. "I'm telling you," said Willow, "but if you keep interrupting, I'll run out of breath and I won't be able to finish the story." "Sorry," said Arwen. "That's all right," said Willow, "but I'll have to start again." Her mother, who was coming into the room with a glass of homemade lemonade for each of them, smiled, put the glasses on the little table by the couch, and with her finger to her lips went quietly out. Willow sighed. She waited until Arwen took a drink and sank back again into the cushions. "Now everybody has to be quiet," she said. Arwen nodded. "There were only the Mud Fairies," repeated Willow firmly, "and they lived in the mud by the side of the pond. Their little homes were deep down inside the mud. They had made the tiniest little tunnels in from the bank, just up from where the water lapped gently against the sides. They had cut little oval doors out of mud and dried them high up the grass on a hot summer's day." "What did they look like?" asked Arwen, forgetting for a moment to be quiet. Willow didn't seem to mind. She was thinking. "They looked like ordinary little fairies," she said. "They were so very tiny, much smaller even than that little silver eye hanging upside down from the bush by the window. Can you see it getting berries?" Arwen nodded. "Go on," she said anxiously. "I am going on," said Willow. "I was telling you how very, very tiny they were, and that they looked just like ordinary fairies, with their little arms and legs and dear little faces. Some of them had fair hair, all golden like the colour of the full moon. Others had silvery hair like the dewdrops on spiders' webs." "I don't mind spiders," said Owen. "We'd have too many flies if we didn't have spiders." "And some of them had hair the same colour as yours," went on Willow, "the colour of acorns when they've fallen from the tree." Arwen looked pleased. "Were these the ones who were going to turn into the tree fairies?" "Probably," agreed Willow, "but not yet. They were still the Mud Fairies, and they didn't yet have any wings." "Why didn't they?" asked Arwen anxiously. "You have to wait," said Willow, "or I won't be able to finish the story." Arwen nodded. "So there they were, living in little houses made of mud," continued Willow. "It was nice in summer. They could make little mud slides to play on and slip into the water. It was lovely and cool on hot summer's days." She thought for a minute. "Sometimes the tadpoles in the pond would let them have rides on their backs," she continued. "Then the little boy and girl Mud Fairies would hold on tight. The tadpoles would race around the pond, chasing one another and snapping at the tiny flies close to the surface. It was great fun for the fairies when they dived down suddenly and then came up very fast. I'd like to do that, said Owen. She was feeling a lot better now and drank some more lemonade. Yes, they liked that, smiled Willow, and they loved it when some of the tadpoles grew into frogs and would give them piggybacks around the edge of the pond. They would bounce up and down and sometimes fall in. Then they tried to make as big a splash as possible. Owen laughed. I can make a great big splash. I'm glad I'm learning to swim. Willow nodded. The mud fairies could swim quite well, she remembered. So sometimes they would swim out to a lily pad and lie there in the sun, looking up at the swallows diving close to the water's edge, or just watching the clouds floating by. Or they would wave at the beautiful dragonflies as they hovered above them like magical helicopters. She thought for a minute. These were red, blue, or striped yellow and brown, with the wings the colour of the rainbow. You see, the tiny mud fairies wore grey clothes, she asked, so they could quickly hide in the mud and not be seen if anything worrying came close. What did they have to eat? Owen felt she just had to know. They used to gather berries to dry in the sun and store in their little larders. There were all sorts of plants and fruit and nuts that we don't know about. These would be so small that we probably couldn't even see them. Willow was thinking hard, as if bringing back into her mind things from quite a long time ago. The bees which gathered the pollen from the wildflowers nearby would sometimes bring them a little honey, and of course they could drink the dew from the flowers and from the grasses by the pond first thing in the morning. They had little storage bowls made from the cups which acorns sit in. Owen smiled. She had some of these little cups in the treasure drawer by her bed. And deep inside the banks of the pond were their little houses, continued Willow. They lined them with dried grasses and the flowers which grew near the pond's edge. These were roomy and warm in winter when they could sleep through the long, cold days. Did they hibernate? Owen asked. Willow nodded. When the wind blew hard outside and the frost settled on the ground, they would stay curled up, cuddled together in their little beds, and they would not wake up until they heard the cuckoo call in spring. It must have been a bit cold in the mud sometimes, Owen couldn't help thinking. Why did they stay there? Why didn't they go somewhere else? Because, said Willow, because they really didn't know about anywhere else. You have to remember that they were very, very tiny. When they ventured away from the pond's edge, they were much smaller than the long grass which grew in the field nearby. They couldn't see over it. Sometimes they made pathways through it to explore. One or two of them had tried to go as far as they could, but it was so easy to get lost. Even the little field mice which made their nests close by were bigger than they were. And hawks dropping from the sky to catch a mouse would give them an awful fright. And this is where everything changed, said Willow, looking thoughtful. You see, what happened was that a hawk, by mistake, picked up a little mud fairy in its cruel claws. That's awful, said Owen, sitting bolt upright. What happened? Well, said Willow, things were never the same again. Was she hurt? Asked Owen anxiously. You have to wait, said Willow, because a lot happened then and I'm trying to remember it properly. All right, said Owen. But I hope she was all right, she whispered to herself. The little mud fairy called for help. Yes, now I remember, said Willow, looking pleased. She called so loudly that the hawk got a dreadful fright and dropped her at once. Down, down, down she went, and she might have been hurt very badly, except that a friendly little cloud saw what was happening. It moved a little closer and caught her as she fell. Was it like the one out of the window there? Asked Owen. It might have been, Willow agreed, looking out. Perhaps it was the same one. Clouds turn into rain and fall, but they come back again and again. That one certainly looks a dear little cloud. Anyway, she continued, the cloud that caught her sailed down quietly until it was low as dead to go. Then it tipped her off gently just over the pond, and she landed on a water lily. Thank heaven, said Owen, and gave a sigh of relief. It wasn't all bad, though, said Willow, because when the little fairy got back to the others, she told them about a wonderful world she had seen stretching far, far away from where they all lived. There were great forests and hills, and mountains white with snow in the background. They sparkled beautifully in the sunlight. She had seen wonderful animals, horses galloping across fields, lambs and baby goats jumping in the air and playing, and gardens of flowers. And when she had marvelled at them all and at the way the birds were speeding fast across the sky, she had cried out loud, "Oh, I wish I could fly." The little cloud had heard her. "Do you really wish you could fly?" it whispered. "Your life would change so much if you could. But you might have to leave your home and live far away and help to look after all the little things in the world. There are so many of them to be looked after, and you would be very, very busy, much busier than playing by the side of the pond and sleeping away the winters. You should always be careful what you wish for." "But I wouldn't mind," said the little fairy. "It gets lonely where we live, although the pond is lovely, and the tadpoles and dragonflies especially are our friends." "Yes, I would wish for wings as beautiful as the dragonfly's wings." "Then you will have one chance," said the little cloud in a soft little voice, "but only one. It will not be for a very long time, perhaps a very, very long time indeed, but it will be your only chance. If you wish when the moon is blue, just as it passes overhead, your wish will be granted. You will need to stand in the moonlight and reach up, holding your hands high, calling to the moon as it passes. On these nights, and only on the night when a full moon comes and turns blue, all things are possible. Can you be patient?" "Oh, yes," said the little mud fairy, "and I will tell all the other fairies. Will it listen to us all?" "Yes, on that very special night, whatever you wish for will be granted. So be very careful, won't you? And remember something else very important, won't you? Goodbye." And this is where she gently tipped the little mud fairy off above the pond. What happened then? And was the little fairy careful? Arwen felt anxious. Well, she was a wise little fairy. She had known to call for help in the first place when the hawk snatched her up. So she thought for a long time about what she would like to wish for. In the meantime, she told the others about what the little cloud had told her. They were all very excited. But when the long days and months went by, they began to get less careful about each taking a turn every night to watch the moon. When it was small, lying on its back in the sky, it was silver. It grew whiter as it grew rounder, and when it was full, it used to be like a golden ball coming up through the trees. Then it would fade away again, and it would be a long time properly coming back. But every night, no matter whose turn it was, the wise little fairy would peep out to look at the moon before she would properly go back to sleep. Then it was never blue. Arwen was disappointed. "Never," said Willow firmly, until many, many months had gone by. And on this night the little fairy was tired, so tired that she went to bed early. She felt sad. She had hoped for so long, but nothing had happened. All the other fairies at last went to bed, and she suddenly woke up. "I must not sleep properly," she said to herself, "until I say goodbye to the moon tonight. I am so tired of waiting for a full moon. Perhaps it will never come." And then the words of the little cloud came back to her. So she made herself get up and go to stand outside by the side of the pond. The first thing she noticed as she crept out onto the bank was the reflection of the full moon right in the middle of the water. She looked up, and there was the most beautiful moon she had ever seen. Near it was a wisp of cloud like a soft scarf flung across the sky. But the moon itself was a pale blue-grey, and she saw that very soon it would disappear into the cloud. "Oh no," she cried, and she raced back to the sleeping fairies. "Come quickly, quickly," she called, "or it'll be too late. It's here. The blue moon is here. It's time to make our wish." Then she ran back to the edge of the pond, while the sleepy fairies came tumbling out one by one, the smaller ones rubbing their eyes and blinking, finding it hard to wake up. They would not be all in time, she realized, but she stood with her little arms raised high towards the sky and waited and waited, watching the moonlight on the surface of the pond creeping closer towards her. And then suddenly she felt the time was right, that the moon was now directly overhead. So she held up her arms even higher and she called out loudly, as loud as she could, towards the night sky. "Oh, moon, oh, very special moon, I wish for wings. I wish for wings for us all, wings like the dragonbow colours, like the rainbow colours of the dragonfly's wings. And I wish for a land of our very own, a magic land where fairies can live and play and do wonderful things and look after everything that needs looking after, in the trees and flowers and everywhere where little things need help. Or would you give us all wings, please, wings to fly to our very own land?" What happened then? Did anything happen? Arwen felt she had to know right away. "Yes, it did," said Willow happily, "but not for a minute or two. And when it did, it was probably because this little fairy was so very wise, because she had remembered the very last thing that the cloud had sent to her." What was that? Arwen was hugely excited. It had told her not to forget something important. And for a long time little fairy had wondered what it might mean. She'd thought and thought about it, she'd puzzled for so long. But that night she remembered. What was it? Arwen couldn't wait. It was something quite simple. She whispered, "Thank you," as she suddenly realised how important it was always to say, "Thank you." Then she said it again, louder, and the third time she called out with her arms still held high, "Thank you, oh thank you very, very much." And at that very moment the moon suddenly glowed. The most beautiful soft blue with a scarf of clouds swept all across it, and it disappeared from sight. "What happened then?" breathed Arwen. All the little fairies called out to one another joyfully as they felt a warm tingle high up on their banks, and each little fairy, even little ones that had come a little late, began to grow wings. Willow smiled. The moon was now hidden, but that night that light it had left behind stayed with them for a little, and they could see that every one of them now had beautiful rainbow-coloured wings, even the tiniest little baby fairies. Arwen sighed. "Is that the end?" she asked. "I think so for now," said Willow. "I feel tired and I'd like to go outside now." She sighed as well. "I would too," agreed Arwen. "I'm feeling a lot better. Thank you, Willow." "There's just something I remember," Willow added, and she looked happy again. "What's that?" asked Arwen. "Well, they did fly off to their very own brand new fairyland, but first they crept back inside to sleep, to wait until the very next morning, when they could say goodbye to the tadpoles and the dragonflies, and ask them to tell the frogs, who didn't often come out to play until later in the day. Then in the very early morning they flew off to find their own land. Somehow the little mud fairy knew where it would be, and when they at last came to it and had to pick a fairy queen, she became the first fairy queen of all, and they all lived happily ever after. Did they still have grey dresses? Just grey dresses? "Oh no," said Willow. "From then onwards each of them had beautiful dresses, all in different colours. The fairies that looked after the poppies and roses and bluebells and all the pretty flowers had red and yellow, blue and purple, and orange and white flowers to match the colours they looked after. The fairies of the trees had green, brown, gold, and all the colours of autumn." She smiled and nodded. "And the fairy queen herself, the clever little mud fairy, always wore gold and silver, the colours of the moon. But on rainy nights she would sometimes wear a shawl of soft grey, sparkling with diamond dewdrops, so that they would never forget the pond they'd come from and their friends there." They were both quiet for a moment. Then, "Come on outside," she said cheerfully. "You look a lot better." Arwen was quiet for a minute. "I wish I could see a fairy," she said. "So do I," said Willow. "But I think I remember them from when I was very, very small. And sometimes I think I hear them in among the trees at night. As long as we know they're there, that's the important thing." Arwen nodded, and the little cloud listening at the window almost seemed to nod to itself too. as it lifted up and down in a little gentle breeze and began to move very slowly on.